under the render region options and also under render options here, we do have the option for BSP tree, which is defined right here. So we do have the max size, max depth, max memory, and separate BSP tree for shadows. Let's go over the first one. Size defines the maximum number of triangle a voxel can contain, or a leaf node. So let's say, for example, a given voxel or leaf node contains, let's say, 30 triangles, and the actual user-defined max size is 20. It means that this box contains way too many triangles, so it has to be split in two. Every time we take a box and we split it in two, we increase the max depth, the actual depth recursion, by 1. The max depth defines the number of times the actual volume is going to be sliced up. So let's say, for example, we start with the room containing all the people in the room, and this is basically depth 0. And so we slice it, let's say, from left to right. So we split the actual room in two such that we have an even number of people in both sub-rooms, let's say, for example. Then every time we slice up in a given axis, either X, Y, or Z, we increase the depth by 1. The max depth basically defines the when to stop splitting boxes. So even though a given box may contain 100, 100, let's say, triangles, even though the user said, I just want to have 20, if the actual maximum depth is set to 1, then actually these boxes will not be splitted further, because max depth has a higher priority through the BSP tree process than max size. So right now the default is really 2040. So let's put these value back so we can actually refer to it a little bit later. So the max step is really subdividing the scene and limiting the actual recursion or splitting. Every time there's a split that occurs in a box, that uses more memory, because every box has to register or remember the triangle that is contained in the box. And those triangles could be either static or moving. Let's say, for example, a given triangle moves into space from shutter open to shutter close. Well, the voxel has to remember that the given triangle is passing through itself, or the voxel, from a given shutter time. So it has to remember all this. And every time you create more voxel, it means that you have to allocate memory for each of those voxel, because there's a structural information being retained by each of these voxels, and their memory demand will increase as you recurse more. The max memory limit, when it's set to 0, then mentally there's no really limit for BSP tree. If you set it up to a value, some very simple scene may require just few kilobytes of BSP tree, where some other actually can require a few hundred megabytes for BSP tree structure to allocate the BSP tree structure. So in terms of importance, the max memory is also higher priority than max depth and max size, because if you do split up, let's say you put the actual max depth to 100, which actually is not a practical value in production, but let's say we push this to really a maximum value, a really high value, then obviously even though the max depth is set to 100, if we say, oh no, you're just allowed to allocate up to 1 megabyte of BSP tree memory, then obviously we'll never go beyond probably depth 3, 4, 5, 6, or even 10. So it will never even reach 100 depth. So memory is really another factor where it has a higher priority over all the other parameters. The other option is separate BSP tree for shadow objects. So it is possible that you do have objects that only cast shadows. That may be very complex. So in order to to maximize memory, it will basically take this object and split it into a separate BSP tree. The main reason why this is being done is it is always better to allocate smaller chunk of memory than allocating one huge chunk of memory. And this is for any software. The fact that you break it up into smaller chunks gives you a better chance of finding a space in the memory to allocate that chunk. And let's say, for example, you got a 1 gig RAM, laptop or machine, and you say, well, I need to have 500 megabyte that is contiguous, meaning that there's really nothing that no memory is being allocated for of a contiguous chunk. Then obviously it's going to be harder for the system to actually find that memory. So if you do say, well, I prefer to say, give me 500 1 meg memory chunk, then it will be able to find spots in the memory to allocate this. So you have a better chance to actually finding this 500 megabyte of RAM. So that's why this option exists. Is a separate BSP for shadow object allows to simply do a better memory management. So if you do have ray trace shadows, for example, this is an important parameter to tune in and set, because that's going to actually balance better memory. And also, whenever Mentor has to flush out some memory, then obviously you can flush out the shadows separately from the actual BSP tree used for the actual camera rendering.